this idea of victimhood, it's so profound. Both of you are kind of acknowledging it because, in the book, I really talk about that the way internalized bias works across our identities, whether it's being a mother or a woman or a person of color or being gay, is really the kind of jumping between two consciousness, which is victimhood and entitlement. They're really like two sides of the same coin, because victimhood really says that it shouldn't be this way and it should be this other way, which is the face of entitlement. And that entitlement really comes from feeling victimized by something else, right? So, and I see this so much in basically every crisis in our world, every ism, every phobia, right? That, when I think about a lot of the affirmative action cases in our country being challenged in the courts, it's generally some white plaintiff who decides that, oh, I should have gotten into this prestigious Ivy League school, but because I didn't get in and I had the scores, it's because of some Black person, right? Even though we look at the numbers, we're like, well, if affirmative action was really working, every Ivy League school would be at least 13 to 14% Black, right? Which is at parity. But it's not, right? But even that entitlement that, oh, I should be able to get in. But then beneath that is really victimhood, that somehow the system is victimizing me. And how have you seen that operate? I'll start with you, Heather, because you've worked with so many people, leaders around the world, like you said, 70 countries or so, from the Pacific Islands to the West Bank. And yeah, like how has that shown up in leadership?
Well, I'm so curious about what then like the middle is. Like
Yeah.
if this is victimhood and this is entitlement, like what is the middle?
Yeah. Well,
It-
that's the breaking bias piece, which is standing in our power, in our agency, right?
yeah. Yeah, I love that. And it's so interesting for me in this work. I I a lot of times I joke that I'm a one trick pony. Like I've been running the same curriculum since 2011, and I evolve it in some ways, but basically the same thing over
Yeah.
and over and over again. And I never tire of it. And the but what it's given me is like this really interesting kind of sample of what human beings kind of go through when they first start to stand in their story, because it's about people telling their truest personal story publicly. So what's interesting is that and it's helpful to have this frame about victimhood and entitlement, is the first thing that the thing that stops a lot of people from telling their story is that they feel like their story is like too sad, too personal, too hard, um, and like that it's going to be a sob story. That's like people say that all the time. Like, I don't want to just like tell a sob story, but it is a sob story. So like
Yeah.
there is this real um need to for a lot of us to acknowledge when we have been victimized, and when something has happened to us, or when we have done something that we really didn't want to happen to us,
Yes.
because I think there's kind of like sometimes there's this jumping ahead and just being like every obstacle is an opportunity, and you're like, it's so interesting sometimes because it's like in our first session when people are life mapping, so many times people will be sharing their life map and sharing really, really hard things, with me. And I will just be like crying and crying and crying during it. And just like wiping my tears away, like, and I'll just be like, oh my God, this person has navigated so much in their
Yeah.
life. And then their response when I ask like how that was to share, they're just like, um, I mean, it's just my life. So like, you know, and sometimes it just feels like what needs to be said is that you navigated so much. Like I really sometimes have to say, and I don't even know if it's exactly what I feel, but I have to say, like, I wish you didn't have to go through that much.
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And they'll be like, God, thanks for saying that. Like, I guess me too. Like,
Yeah.
we get hardened to try to like
Yeah.
deal with all that has gone on in our lives. And
Mm.
so I just feel like, you know, acknowledging ourselves and our journey,
Mm.
like, and just like humbly like bowing to it and being like, man,
Yeah.
and like one of my favorite quote, which I feel like, I literally saw on the wall of the bathroom, like it's one of those cheesy stories, like life changed because of that moment, was
Yeah.
forgiveness, giving up all hope for a better past.
Yes. Whew.
That's all this is. In order to forgive myself and to forgive other people, all I have to do is give up hope for a better past. Like, I can do that. And I
Wow.
just feel like when you do that, you arrive at like, oh, here I am.
Oh my
The
gosh,
good, the
Heather.
bad, the unthinkable. I'm here, you know?
You're talking about the prison toolkit, like literally from mindfulness to, acknowledging, noticing, curiosity, to this your response. Like I remember when I first shared my story with you before the TED Talk, and you were that person. You were literally like crying, and I was like, "Why is she crying? It's not that big of a deal." Whereas you're like, "It is a big deal."
A
Like, what are you
lot.
talking about? And like that sense of validation is so important because at that moment I hadn't acknowledged the amount of pain I was already carrying within me, and the listening ear of another really helped me acknowledge that pain and then begin to address it, which was so powerful. um, and also is known as empathy, right? And the role of empathy in this work. um, Amina, like same thing for you. Like, how have you noticed this in your clients, like this battle of victimhood and entitlement? And I loved this phrasing of having been victimized is different from adopting victimhood as an identity.
Yeah. Yeah. I love you both so much. This is such a beautiful conversation. I was struck by what Heather said and what you just reflected on it too. I think it's really important that people witness us and that, we find sort of that middle ground of our stories of not fully going to the toxic positivity space of this happened and I'm fine and it's great, or the other end of like, oh, it wasn't even a thing. But I think it is a both and of like when I think about my life and when I did the story mapping with you, Heather, and the milestones that have happened since, it's like absolutely there are things on that list that I wish did not exist. And it's made me the teacher and person and human and sister that I am today. And so like there's both this tension between real grief and gratitude. And it's so nuanced.
Yeah.
And I feel like I see that tension between the grief and the gratitude with my clients as well. But victimhood in the context of our work and sort of jockeying between the victimhood and the entitlement, it happens a lot in the workplace, right? Especially for historically excluded people. I mostly work with women of color, people with disability, and occupying other intersections. And so everything from the broken rung where, 100 cishet white men are promoted to manager and only 82 women, or the glass cliff where like if you happen to be a person of color or somebody with a disability or a queer person that makes it through the glass ceiling, you're going to be asked to work in really tenuous situation, not be given resources and be edged off the cliff, or the pay gap or the sleep gap, right? There's all of these ideologies and systems that set people up to be victimized. But then I
Yeah.
think also the choice to recognize that, yes, I have been victimized and I'm not going to live in the victimhood.
No, I love that. And